September 2014. A hunter's body is found 15 miles from where he vanished, on the far side of a 10,000-foot mountain in Montana. He crossed it barefoot, through freezing terrain, no boots, no gear, no rational explanation. October 2022, a Colorado rancher finds 40 of his cattle slaughtered overnight. 40,000 pounds of animal destroyed. The surrounding mud? Undisturbed. No predator tracks, no prints, and nothing. October 2023, a couple films something moving on two legs through the Colorado high country, pacing a freight train. It doesn't move like a bear. It doesn't move like a person. It doesn't match anything on record. 3 documented events. 3 moments where the logic of the Rocky Mountains quietly fractured. All verified by major publications. The first story starts in a range they call the Crazy Mountains, and the man who walked into them had every reason to believe he'd walk back out. The Crazies, that's what locals call them, sit in south-central Montana like a fortress of jagged black rock. The peaks are steep enough to make your neck ache just looking up. The weather turns violent with almost no warning. And the forest, miles and miles of dense pine, where the canopy is so thick it swallows sound whole. This range doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you've survived before. September 5th, 2014. Aaron Hedges, 38 years old, is deep in those mountains with 2 companions, Greg and Joe, on a bow hunting trip they'd been planning for months. And Aaron is no weekend camper stumbling around in new boots. This man lived for the backcountry. He could read terrain the way most people read street signs. He could look at a shifting sky and tell you exactly how many hours you had before it turned ugly. His friends would later describe him as one of the most naturally capable outdoorsmen they had ever known. So when his mule spooked on the trail and he lost part of his gear, including his sleeping bag, Aaron didn't panic. He did what, in his mind, made perfect tactical sense. He told Greg and Joe to keep moving along the route. He'd double back to Sunlight Lake on his own, retrieve the sleeping bag, and catch up with them before dark. Now, splitting from your group in the wilderness, that is the cardinal rule every survival manual, every park ranger, every grizzled backcountry outfitter will tell you never to break. You stay together. Full stop. Aaron knew the rule. He just believed, with very good reason, that he had the skills to bend it. He had his compound bow. He had a GPS unit. He had food, water, fire-starting gear, extra layers. He'd run the math in his head. The distance to Sunlight Lake, the remaining daylight, his own physical conditioning, and the numbers all worked. To him, this was a solved equation. A quick detour, nothing more. So he stepped off the main trail and pushed into that thick pine forest alone. Calm, methodical, carrying every tool and every instinct that a lifetime in the wild had sharpened to a razor's edge. What Aaron couldn't have calculated, what no GPS, no gear list, no amount of experience could have warned him about, was that the Crazy Mountains were about to stop playing by any rules he'd ever learned. The sky collapsed. That's the only way to describe what happened. One moment. Blue sky, visible ridge lines, the familiar geometry of the Crazy Mountains laid out like a map you could read. The next, gone. All of it. Swallowed by a roaring white wall so dense it erased everything. Depth, direction, horizon. The world just stopped existing. Snow is supposed to fall. This moved sideways, driven by wind that screamed through the passes like something alive and wounded. The kind of cold that doesn't creep. It hits, like stepping into an ocean current made of glass. Your exposed skin burns, then goes numb. Your eyelashes freeze shut. And the sound. Imagine standing inside a freight train. That low, unrelenting roar fills your skull until you can't hear your own breathing. You can't hear yourself think. And somewhere inside that howling void, Aaron Hedges reached for his radio one last time. His voice came through calm, measured, the way a professional sounds when they're refusing to let panic win. He told his friends he'd gotten a little turned around in the whiteout, but he was correcting his course. Those were the last words anyone ever heard from Aaron Hedges. A man who'd spent his whole life in places like this. Gone. Just gone. When the storm relented enough to allow movement, a massive search operation mobilized. Helicopters swept low over the western slopes near Sunlight Lake. Ground teams pushed through waist-deep drifts. Search dogs, trained animals capable of detecting human scent, buried under feet of debris, were deployed across the area. The dogs found nothing. No scent trail. No indication a human being had passed through at all. As if Aaron had simply been lifted clean off the mountain. Eventually, the weather won. Searches were called off, and authorities reached what seemed like the only logical conclusion. Aaron Hedges, separated from his group in an extreme and sudden blizzard with no sleeping bag, succumbed to hypothermia. He froze to death somewhere on that western slope. Tragic, explainable, the kind of ending that makes sense on paper. And for a while, that was the answer. Case closed. A good man lost to a bad storm. But here's the thing about the crazy mountains. They hold on to their secrets, buried under snow, locked in ice, until they're ready to let go. And when spring finally came, when the snowpack pulled back from those peaks like a slow, deliberate curtain, what was underneath didn't confirm that tidy conclusion. It didn't just contradict it, it shattered it completely. It was two hunters who found it first. Late spring 2016, eastern slope near Sunlight Lake. And what they spotted stopped them where they stood. A pair of hunting boots, sitting neatly side by side on a rock. Right next to them, a water bladder, not scattered, not thrown, placed. Like someone had sat down, carefully removed their boots, set their water beside them, and walked away barefoot into the mountains. Now sit with that for a second. You're on the eastern side of a ridge in the crazy mountains. Temperatures at elevation still dropping well below freezing. And someone took off their boots and kept going. Uphill, away from the trail, away from camp, away from every direction that makes sense if you're trying to survive. That alone is unsettling. But it's what the mountain revealed next that changed everything. Over the following weeks, searchers recovered Aaron's bow and his backpack, 6 miles deeper into the wilderness from those boots, 6 miles farther from safety. And then, on private ranch land west of Melville, they found skeletal remains. Dental records confirmed it in August 2016. Aaron Hedges, 15 miles. His body was 15 miles from his last known position near Sunlight Lake. Hold that number, 15 miles. Now picture what sits between those 2 points. The main ridge of the crazy mountains, a jagged spine of rock climbing above 10,000 feet. Sheer, exposed, brutal in good weather, lethal in a storm. He crossed it, barefoot, in a blizzard that had swallowed the sky. And here's the detail that sinks everything into silence. During the original search, multiple teams ran scent-tracking dogs along that ridge. Trained animals, the kind that can pick up a human trail days old through wind, through rain, through deep snow. Those dogs found nothing. Not a single scent crossing that ridge, as if no living person had ever walked it. So hold all of this together now. A man with decades of backcountry experience removes his boots in sub-zero conditions. He walks barefoot, uphill, away from safety. He crosses a 10,000-foot mountain ridge during a whiteout blizzard. He covers 15 impossible miles of some of the most punishing terrain in Montana. And he leaves behind no scent. Nothing. As if whatever moved him across that divide never quite touched the ground. The authorities had no explanation. The tidy conclusion, exposure, a freezing death somewhere nearby, didn't collapse. It evaporated, like it had never been solid to begin with. And if that leaves you uneasy, the thought that something in these mountains can carry a person 15 miles through conditions no human body should survive without leaving so much as a trace, then you're paying attention, because Aaron wasn't the only secret the Rockies were holding. A few hundred miles south, in the high pastures of Colorado, ranchers had started finding something even harder to process. Not a missing person this time. Animals, entire herds of cattle, dropped dead where they stood, untouched by any predator, altered in ways no veterinarian had ever seen. Lenny Klingelsmith didn't care about mysteries. He cared about money. Fourth-generation rancher, born and raised outside Meeker, Colorado. The kind of guy who could tell you the market price of a yearling steer down to the cent before his morning coffee got cold. October 2022. He rides up to his alpine pasture, 9,000 feet, edge of the White River National Forest, to check on his herd before the first real snow pushes them down to lower ground. What he finds up there stops him cold. Roughly 40 head of cattle, dead, scattered across the high grass like something had moved through them in a single pass. Trauma to the hindquarters, dark shapes in the grass, one after another, after another. These weren't sick animals. They were healthy, well-fed, worth tens of thousands of dollars combined. And now, they were just gone. But here's the thing about Lenny. He didn't flinch into fear. He flinched into fury. Because Lenny already had his answer. Colorado had been pushing wolf reintroduction, a policy that had ranchers across the western slope grinding their teeth for years. And to a man like Lenny, standing in that pasture surrounded by dead livestock, this wasn't some unexplainable event. This was a wolf pack on a killing spree. A political failure with a body count you could measure in pounds and dollars. So he does what any pragmatic rancher would do. He picks up the phone, calls Colorado Parks and Wildlife, files a formal report. He wants documentation. He wants compensation. He wants someone held accountable for 40 dead animals at 9,000 feet. And CPW responds exactly the way you'd expect. They send a team, heavily armed wildlife officers trained specifically in large predator forensics. These are people who've spent entire careers reading kill sites the way you or I would read a paragraph. Claw patterns, bite radius, blood trail geometry. They know what a wolf kill looks like. They know what a bear leaves behind. They know what a mountain lion does to a carcass. They drive up to that pasture carrying every tool they need to close this case in a day. What they don't know yet, what Lenny doesn't know yet, is that none of those tools are going to matter. The thermal imaging drones went up first, state-of-the-art equipment, sweeping the meadow in overlapping grids. Expert trackers, people who've spent decades reading the language of disturbed earth, walked that perimeter on hands and knees. The ground was soft. Recent rain had turned that high-altitude pasture into a perfect recording surface. Every hoof, every paw, every boot that touched that mud should have left a clear signature. They found nothing. Not a single track, not one impression leading toward or away from 40,000 pounds of dead cattle. No predator approach, no drag marks, no human footprints. The mud had recorded everything that happened on that meadow, and what it recorded was that nothing had been there. Let that sit for a second. 40,000 pounds of flesh and bone, scattered across a mountain pasture. And the earth itself says, nothing touched them. The CPW veterinary team ran their analysis through October and November of 2022. They examined the bite wounds on the carcasses. And here's where it gets worse. The patterns didn't match wolves, didn't match mountain lions, bears, or any known predator in the state of Colorado. Toxic plants? Ruled out. Pathogens? Ruled out. Disease? Categorically eliminated. Every single branch on the decision tree snapped off. By February 2023, CPW officially closed the case. Unsolved. No determination of cause. And Lenny's family? They declined the financial compensation they were entitled to. Because there was no evidence of wolves. And Lenny was nothing if not honest. You don't take money for something you can't prove. But the detail that still keeps me up at night, it's what the animals did. Or rather, what they refused to do. 40,000 pounds of free rotting meat. Open meadow. Rocky mountains. That is a signal fire for every scavenger within miles. Coyotes, vultures, ravens. These creatures have evolved over millions of years to find exactly this. We're talking hard-coded, biological imperative. None of them came. The forest around the kill site went silent. Vultures circled high overhead, dozens of them riding the thermals. You could watch them wheel for hours. But they refused to land. Coyote tracks appeared in the mud from the tree line and just stopped. Clean. Like something invisible had drawn a boundary that every living creature understood not to cross. Every creature except us. One investigator later put it the only way that made sense. He said it was simply as if the killer had floated over the herd, struck them down, and then floated away. I want you to think about that. What unseen force could terrify nature's bravest scavengers away from 40,000 pounds of free meat? I genuinely want to hear what you think. Tell me in the comments. Because here's where this story changes shape entirely. Everything up to now, we've been drifting through dark water, chasing something we cannot see. No tracks, no scent, no explanation. A presence that only exists in the silence where evidence should be. But someone finally caught it on camera. A clear physical form. Standing upright on two legs. Filmed from a moving train. Right here in Colorado. The train rocks gently on the narrow gauge rails. Warm air inside the car. Steel and glass between them and the October cold. Shannon steadies the camera against the window frame, tracking the figure on the opposite slope. And here's the thing. She's not scared. She's annoyed. Because what her brain has already filed with absolute certainty is some idiot in a brownish ghillie suit scrambling across that mountainside without a stitch of safety orange. In Colorado. During hunting season. Where that's not just reckless. It's illegal. Stetson leans in beside her, squinting through the glass. Years in Cheyenne. Years watching hunters move through Wyoming's open country. They know what a human body looks like navigating a slope. The cadence, the gait, the way knees bend and arms counterbalance on uneven ground. So this registers as nothing more than a local poacher who thinks the rules don't apply to him. That's the story. Clean, simple, mundane. Filed under minor irritation observed from a perfectly safe distance. Another passenger has their phone pressed to the window now. A few others are leaning in, pointing. Everyone's brain has reached for the same comfortable explanation, because that's what minds do when something doesn't quite fit. They grab the nearest familiar label and grip it like a railing in rough water. The train keeps rolling, steady, enclosed, dozens of passengers, the mechanical heartbeat of steel on track, and the figure keeps moving across that slope. For a few more comfortable seconds, the world still obeys every rule you've ever known. Then the thing shifts its weight, and it bends, moves, in a way that no human skeleton, no arrangement of muscle and tendon and joint can physically replicate. The camera doesn't blink. So let me walk you through exactly what the camera captured. Frame by frame. Because your brain is going to do what everyone's brain does first. It's going to reach for the comfortable answer. A poacher? A hiker in a weird outfit. Some blundering human stumbling through the sagebrush in a ghillie suit. That's the safe explanation. Let's see how long it holds. The train is rolling past, maybe 30 miles an hour, and the lens catches this figure on a steep hillside blanketed in dry sagebrush. The grade is severe, and this figure is traversing it laterally. Watch how it moves. It slides across that slope with a fluid, continuous gait that never once breaks rhythm. No stutter stepping. No balance correction. No awkward human ankle adjustment. And every single one of us makes those adjustments on uneven terrain. Every half second. Your knees, your hips, your inner ear. They're constantly negotiating with gravity on a grade like that. That's just how human bipedal locomotion works. But this figure negotiates nothing. It flows downhill the way water finds its channel. Hyper-efficient, almost frictionless. Like the slope is irrelevant to it. Then it notices the train. And this is where it gets cold. Because when a human realizes they're being observed, there's a predictable pattern. You straighten up, you turn your head, you shield your eyes, maybe you freeze for a second. This thing does none of that. In one single motion, one utterly non-human motion, it folds its legs beneath its body and drops directly into the sagebrush. Gone. No wobble, no rebalancing, no hesitation. Like a switch was flipped in something very old and very practiced. Now freeze that frame. Look at the body. The arms hang to its knees, not slightly long, to its knees. The head is conical, sitting directly on massive shoulders with no visible neck separating them. The Denver Post reported on this footage. The New York Times confirmed it. And here's what matters about those proportions. You cannot fake them with padding or prosthetics while simultaneously maintaining that frictionless sliding gait on a steep incline. The physics don't allow it. A suit restricts joint articulation. A suit adds bulk that demands more energy on a grade. A suit does not drop into a perfect crouch without a single frame of lost balance. One observer described the moment precisely. This thing just folded its legs and crouched low into the sagebrush in one smooth motion, blending perfectly into the background. It looked less like a man taking a break and more like an animal engaging its natural camouflage. An animal engaging instinctive camouflage in broad Colorado daylight, captured in high-definition footage that mainstream news outlets verified and published for the world to see. And then the frame goes still. Just sagebrush and wind, as if nothing was ever standing there. But you know something was. And somewhere tonight, past the last trail marker, past the last cell tower, past the last edge of what we've bothered to map, that same stillness is settling into the brush again. Patient, unhurried, watching the ridgeline with eyes we haven't earned the right to meet. 3 things happened along the spine of these mountains that shouldn't have been possible. A man walked 15 miles barefoot through terrain that should have shredded him to bone and left no scent for the dogs to follow. 40 cattle were opened with surgical precision, and every scavenger within miles refused to touch them. And a shape moved through the Colorado tree line on camera, in high definition, with a gait that belongs to nothing we've ever cataloged. We built GPS, thermal drones, forensic labs that can reconstruct a crime scene from a single hair follicle. We genuinely believed the wild had been mapped, measured, accounted for. These mountains don't care. They predate our instruments by 60 million years. And they keep producing moments that make every satellite, every algorithm feel like a child's toy left at the edge of a forest it was never meant to enter. That's what stays with me, the quiet arithmetic underneath all of it. That we are still, right now, tonight, intimately exposed to forces we cannot predict, cannot measure, and cannot prepare for. If you've ever stood in deep woods and felt that silence press against your chest, the one where the birds stop, and your gut says, pay attention, you already understand. That feeling is reverence. Hold on to it. And if this kind of exploration speaks to something in you, subscribe. Stay close. The edge of the map is vast, and we've barely begun walking it.